So it turns out, after 100 billion thousand years, we're finally getting maximums in Duel Links. Are they good?
Could be.
Hello everybody, my name is Kenya K. Today we're talking about rush duels. Now if maximums are good or not, it's kind of hard to answer since Duel Links rush duels revolve around a minimum of 30 cards instead of the usual 40. Also, if Tachyon Dragon has anything to say about it, it has a gigantic emphasis on skills that the regular game doesn't have. So all I can do is kind of estimate whether they're good or not based off of my experience playing the actual game. But without further ado, let's go to the deck list. So in terms of beginning maximum decks, we're probably talking about two different archetypes. The first one is Supreme Machine Magnum Overlord, and the second one is going to be Yugioh Duel, the Sky Emperor. Both of which were the first maximum monsters ever revealed in the anime. Now first, let's go over maximums in general and what I think about them. Maximums, when they first released in the the OCG, they were kind of really weak. They need 3 separate monsters in your hand, and because you can't get rid of them, you can't draw for more cards, since you draw until you have a max of 5. And with them being high-level monsters that don't really do anything, they kind of just become really clunky. The later maximums kind of solve this, but I don't think we're getting them anytime soon. So in the meantime, we gotta work with what we got. Hopefully the dueling skills will kind of remedy this, but since we don't know what they are yet, we can only kind of speculate. Now if you aren't aware, in order to summon a maximum monster, you need to have 3 separate cards in your hand. Let's take Machine Magnum Overlord as an example. You need the center Machine Magnum Overlord, you need the left version, and you also need the right version. You kind of just combine them together. If you've seen those Union cards from Pokemon TCG, they're kind of like that. They basically all have the same artwork, and if you combine them together, they create a bigger picture. Like for example, Yugioh Duel is supposed to have 3 heads, but only has 1 head for each card. In addition, maximum monsters are kind of like Link monsters in that they can't be put in defense position, which means that cards like Shield and Sword are basically kind of useless against them. You'll notice here that every maximum monster has a maximum attack and a regular attack. The regular attack is what happens when you just summon them normally. Their maximum attack is what happens when you properly maximum summon them. So for example, if you properly maximum summon Machine Magnum Overlord, it'll have 3,500 attack. While if you just tribute summon him, he'll just have 1,900 attack. You also notice that the requirement, maximum mode, this means that its effects can only be activated when it's in maximum mode, so i.e. you've properly maximum summoned it. Now each maximum monster will have 3 separate effects at least, with each card having a different effect. Like for example, this one has, this card cannot be destroyed by your opponent's trap card effects. This card has, this card gains attack equal to the difference between your life points and your opponent's life points until the end of the turn. If you've properly maximum summoned the monster, you can use all of these effects on a single monster. Those are the basics of maximum monsters, and now let's get to the actual deck here. So this is going to be a sample deck. This isn't going to be the actual deck in Duel Links since I don't know which cards are going to be coming, and I don't know what skills are going to be coming as well. And I don't know how having only 30 cards is going to affect the consistency of maximum monsters. So I can only guess. Now, Supreme Machine Magnum Overlord. You can maximum summon this card together with Supreme Maximum Overlord L and Supreme Machine Maximum Overlord R. Basically every single maximum monster has this. Requirement, maximum mode. Effect, this card cannot be destroyed by your opponent's trap effects. There's only one trap effect in this game that destroys. Widespread Ruin. However, every single person and their mother plays Widespread Ruin, so this is probably going to be pretty useful. I'm also putting in the Ultimate Flag Mech Ace Breaker cards in here, because being maximum monsters, they're pretty unreliable. They're a really high cost, high risk type of gameplay, so you really kind of do have to have a backup option. Flag Mech Ace Breaker's in here because it's a machine and I really like it and it's pretty cool, and something tells me Yugioh's skill is gonna have something to do with machines. Steel Mech Lord Mirror Innovator. This card did not come out in the structure deck. I don't know if it's gonna be coming out in the main pack. I really hope that it does, because this deck kind of needs it. This is basically our plan B, if plan A doesn't actually do anything. Requirement, none. Choose up to 3 monsters in the graveyard with the same type as this card, so basically machines. This card gains attack equal to the total levels of those monsters times 100 until the end of the turn, then shuffle those monsters into the deck. If you shuffled exactly 1 monster by this effect, this card inflicts piercing battle damage. When it says it gains attack equal to the level, most maximum monsters are level 10. So if you shuffle back a Magnum Overlord, you'll at least be getting 3,400 attack, which is only 100 attack less than the actual maximum monster. Now it's up to you if you want to shuffle back your Magnum Overlord, since a lot of strategies really like having your key cards in the graveyard so you can get them back. But if you need the attack points, then you can also do this. You can also just shuffle back a bunch of your other monsters, since a lot of maximum monsters, they have heavy costs that require you to dump the top cards of your deck to the graveyard, which can actually deck you out, especially in Duel Links, since you have less cards. Next one is Twin Barrel Dragon. I don't know if this is going to be coming. I don't think so. If it's not coming, you can probably just replace it with another legend card like Summon Skull. Now the next card, Supreme Machine Magnum Overlord L. Requirement, maximum mode. If your life points are lower than your opponent's, send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. This card gains attack equal to the difference between your life points and your opponent's life points. It is basically just a boost. I don't think this is that necessary unless you have an opportunity to do damage. Since maximum monsters, they only count as 1 monster, so unless if they say otherwise, they can usually only attack once a turn. So if your opponent just sets everything, then you don't really have an easy way of getting to your opponent's life points. This can help you cycle through your deck though. Supreme Dog Ropero. I think that's how you say its name. Requirement, pay 500 life points and shuffle 2 cards from your hand into the deck. This card cannot be destroyed by battle until the end of your opponent's next turn. Then, you can add 1 level 10 maximum monster / super electromatic maximum BBB Beast Brave Brandish from your graveyard to the hand. This card is kind of tricky since it requires you to shuffle 2 cards from your hand into the deck. However, you can add your level 10 maximum monster or your really long card, of which I will talk about later, to your hand. So I'm not sure how useful this will be, since there's going to be better cards than this, but I don't know if they're coming in the next pack. For this one, you at least won't be able to be destroyed by battle, but you will have to summon it in attack mode 9 times out of 10, so you'll still be taking a crap ton of damage. But it will be able to get you your level 10 maximum monster. However, if you've noticed, not every single maximum monster piece is level 10. This one is a level 10, this one's level 4, this one's level 3. So you'll only be able to get back your main Supreme Machine Magnum Overlord here. If all else fails, you could probably just set this card face down. Next, Ultimate Flag Beast Surge Bicorn. I had really hoped that this came out in the structure deck. Unfortunately, it didn't, so maybe it'll be coming out of the main deck, who knows. Requirement, shuffle 3 machine-type monsters from your graveyard into the deck. This turn, this card can be treated as 2 tributes for the tribute summon of a light attribute machine-type monster in attack position. This is basically for our plan B. It's not that useful in getting us to our maximum monster, but you can just set it face down as a wall, and you can summon your high-level monsters with it. Next, Supreme Machine Magnum Overlord R. Requirement maximum mode. Send the top card of your main deck to the graveyard. This card gains attack equal to the level of 1 face-up monster card on your opponent's field times 200 until the end of this turn. This isn't going to be that useful if your opponent just sets everything, but it can be nice if your opponent still has something on the board. And who knows, since in Duel Links we have 6,000 life instead of 8,000, This might be a little useful. You might be able to end the games a little sooner than this, but like I said before, maximums are really clunky in that the early ones are kinda not good. Next, Ultimate Flag Beast Aim Eagle. This did come out in the structure deck. In the case that we don't actually get a good skill to go with maximums, we can use Yugioh's skill to send back one of our bricks into the deck and get out the Aim Eagle to kind of just unbrick our hand, since we're playing a bunch of bricks, basically. That's basically what most maximum decks are, just a bunch of bricks. Next, BBB, Beast Brave Brandish. Requirement, shuffle 2 maximum monsters from your graveyard into the deck. Effect, draw 1 card, then you can choose 1 monster in maximum mode on your field. If you do while it's face up, it inflicts piercing battle damage. This is going to be another huge brick, which is why I'm not entirely sure if you should include this, because it requires you to have 2 maximum monsters in your graveyard to shuffle back into the deck, but you kind of want to have your maximum monsters in the graveyard in the first place. But at the same time, if you don't have any piercing effects, then your opponent can just set everything and stall the game out. However, if you do get this off, it does mean that your opponent's gonna have a really hard time living. However, the next card I think is going to be a bit more useful than this. If you're gonna get rid of this card, and if you're gonna get rid of one of these, I'd recommend keeping Crank to 10 instead of Beast Brave Brandish, because it's basically just a dead card until you get maximum monsters. In addition to requiring having 2 maximum monsters in your graveyard, this card also needs you to have a monster in maximum mode in order to use its piercing effects, which is why I don't think this card is that good. It's basically going to do nothing most of the time. Now this card is way more potentially useful. Requirement, send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. Effect, choose 1 face-up monster on your field this turn. It gains 400 attack, and if it attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing damage. And if the monster's level is 10, inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. You know what? I'm just gonna get rid of this entirely and add another copy of this, because I don't think that card is good. This one is way more useful. You can just send 1 card from your graveyard, it can be anything, and choose 1 face-up monster. This doesn't have to be a maximum monster, and you can boost it by 400 attack. Sure, there's better cards than this, but it does prevent stalling. And with Duel Links having less life points than normal, this should be more useful than it was in the regular card game. Next, Heavenly Gift. I don't know if we're gonna be getting this card in Duel Links in the next pack. I assume so, because most people play these with maximums. Requirement, none. Send any number of monsters from your hand to the graveyard. If the total levels of those monsters sent to the graveyard by this effect is 10 or higher, you can draw 2 cards. Basically, if you happen to draw a level 10, aka Magnum Overlord, you can just send it to the graveyard to draw 2 cards. Or you can send any combination of monsters from your hand to the graveyard to just draw 2 cards. So you don't have to worry that much about sending your maximum monsters to the graveyard, because we do have ways of getting them back. However, like I said before, the early maximum monsters aren't that good. There are going to be maximum decks that are more able to recover their maximum monsters from the graveyard, so for example, decks revolving around Blazebolt Phoenix will be able to recover their maximum monsters way easier, but unfortunately this is a Go Rush card, so I don't think we'll be getting stuff like this anytime soon. So in the meantime, we have just the early crappy maximum monsters that we can play around with. Next card, Heavenly Invitation. Requirement, none. Send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Then, if you have no monsters on your field, you can add 1 level 10 monster from your graveyard to your hand. This is one of the cards that is able to recover our maximum monsters more easily. However, since it only recovers level 10, we won't be able to get our smaller maximum monsters back to the hand that easily. However, this does mill cards into your graveyard, and that's always pretty good in rush duels. This next card, I don't know if we'll be getting in the main pack. I really hope we do, because this deck kinda needs it. Reoccurring Nightmare. Requirement, none. Add 2 dark attribute monsters with 0 defense from your graveyard to the hand. Well, what do you know? This Machine Magnum Overlord card just happens to have a dark attribute as well as 0 defense. Now, you noticed every maximum monster, as far as I know, or at least these ones, will have 0 defense, and this one just happens to also be dark attribute. So Reoccurring Nightmare will just be able to get us 2 of our maximum monsters from our graveyard to the hand. Okay, next card, Super Electromagnetic Maximum. I have a feeling that this will be included in the main pack because it's maximum themed, but it is one of the other ways of getting our cards back from the graveyard. Requirement: if your opponent has a monster on their field, reveal 1 level 10 machine type monster in your hand to your opponent, meeting our Magnum Overlord. Effect: add 2 machine type monsters from your graveyard to your hand. If you do, you cannot normal summon set monsters from your hand until the end of the turn. We don't really care about that because maximum summoning counts as a special summon. This basically gets us our small maximums from the graveyard to the hand, since we have our other cards of getting the big one back anyways. That's why there's 3 of them. If you don't have maximum monsters in your graveyard, this card is a straight up brick, which is why we have to have a bunch of cards that mill from the top of our deck, and we don't really care if our maximums are in the graveyard. Next, Supreme Marine Fortress Magnum Overbase. I want this card to be in the pack. I don't think it will because Konami hasn't shown any love to field spells yet, aside from that one Mimi one. Requirement: activate this card if your life points are lower than your opponent's. While this card is face up in the field zone, face up level 7 or higher machine type monsters on the field gain 400 attack, and all face up level 10 machine type monsters on the field cannot be destroyed by spell trap card effects. This isn't really going to be that useful because Supreme Machine Magnum Overlord is already immune to destruction by trap effects, and there aren't any spells in the game that are able to destroy monsters yet, so we're only playing this for the 400 attack boost. Honestly, you can probably get rid of this card. Next, Widespread Ruin. Everyone knows what this card does. I don't think I need to explain it. This is our auto-include. I will say, however, that maximums are unable to be destroyed by card effects. Well, most of them are. Specifically this one. I think Yugioh is... Yes, that's right. Both Yugioh and Supreme Machine Magnum Overlord are unable to be destroyed by trap effects. So this card is less useful, but at the same time, it's still really scary. Now, in the future, we should be getting more legend cards like Magic Cylinder, which will be able to bypass maximum monsters because they don't actually destroy, they negate and deal a crap ton of damage. So, but for now, we have to deal with this one. Now, before we move on to the next deck, let me go over some of these cards that I think is worth mentioning. Let's go over Sky Supporter Max. Shovel 10 monsters from your graveyard into the deck. Effect: place 2 to 3 maximum monsters from your graveyard on top of your deck in any order. Seemingly, this looks pretty good on paper. However, especially with Duel Links only having 30 minimum cards in the deck, the chances are of you getting 10 whole monsters into your graveyard without losing the game or winning is pretty low. On top of that, the requirement is to shuffle 10 monsters, and the effect is to place monsters. So you really do need more than 10 monsters to actually pull this off. You need 10 monsters as a requirement, as well as additional maximum monsters that you want to place. So that's why that's not in here. I think I've talked about Brave Brandish before. It's basically just bait. It's a brick. Iron Onslaught. This card is very useful if you're playing a machine deck that doesn't use maximum monsters. However, since we don't really have to worry about Widespread Ruin. If you didn't know, Iron Onslaught is basically an MST, except for machines. So that's why that's not in here. I don't think this deck needs it, and this deck already plays enough bricks. On to the next one, Monster Reincarnation. In the case that Reoccurring Nightmare is not in the main pack, we want to be running Monster Reincarnation. It is basically just baby Reoccurring Nightmare. Requirement: send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. Effect: add 1 monster from your graveyard to the hand. We'll probably be adding a maximum monster to the hand. Now, the reason why it's not in here is because this one adds 2 and doesn't have a requirement. However, if this doesn't come out, then yeah, totally run this. Plus, if other people are going to be running maximum monsters as well, bear in mind that maximum monsters, they don't have any defense. So just like with Link monsters, if you use Shield and Sword against them, it won't do anything. Next, Apocalypse Beast Gear World. I put it in here because I think it's funny and Konami should release the card already. That is all. Next, Joint Tech Rush Horn. I'm 99.999% sure that this card is not coming in the next pack or anytime soon, because on top of being a Go Rush card, this is a Go Rush card used by one of the main characters as part of his archetype. However, this card is really useful for maximum monsters. Requirement: equip this card to one face-up machine-type monster on your field. The equipped monster gains 300 attack, and if it attacks the defense position monster, inflict piercing damage. Also, it's an equipped spell, so I don't think we're going to be getting equipped spells anytime soon. So this card is basically better cranked to 10. It gets you a less attack to 10, but instead of just being a one-time use, it's an equipped spell, so your monster permanently gains the attack and it permanently pierces. I don't think we're getting this though. Next, Heavenly Rest. Requirement: when a monster on your field is destroyed by an opponent's attack or their card effect and you have no other monsters on the field, change one face-up monster on your opponent's field to face-down defense position. Then if the original level of the destroyed monster is 10, you can destroy one face-down card on your opponent's field. On paper, this is pretty good, but unless you have a maximum monster on your field, this card basically does nothing. Just run the barrier instead. Next, Thunderspark. I have a feeling that this isn't going to be in the pack either, but I included it here. It's basically Machine Thunder Curtain of Sparks. Requirement: when an opponent's monster declares an attack while you have a Machine type or Thunder type monster in your graveyard effect, the attacking monster loses 500 attack until the end of the turn. Specifically for this deck, it's not as useful since your aim is to go into maximum monsters, and if your opponent has a way of getting rid of your maximum monster, they have a way of getting rid of your maximum monster. Thunderspark isn't going to do a whole lot unless if they plan to get rid of it by attacking over it. Then you can use this and watch your opponent cry. It is useful, however, if you're using Flag Mech Acebreaker or Mirror Innovator, since you can just activate this and then your opponent will have a much harder time getting over it. So this is basically the Supreme Machine Magnum Overlord deck. It's as close as I could kind of get it to without having the information on what's actually coming out and how it plays using only 30 cards, but in my experience, it's pretty clunky. It's ridiculously clunky, actually.
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
I think this is one of those decks that lives and dies based off of the skill. Now, the skill would ideally have some way of getting maximums to your hand, or at least unbricking your hand, because this deck, maximums in general are really brick, even the modern ones, except for Harpies, because Harpies are broken. Oh yeah, by the way, Harpy maximums are coming to the game. Yeesh. Oh boy, Harpies are scary. Alrighty, so the next deck we'll probably be getting in the next pack. Actually, no, it's almost a guaranteed at this point because I think Nail was data mined or something. I think it was leaked. In any case, Cybers Yugioh. I have less experience playing this deck than the Maximum Overlord deck. However, I think the basic principle is the same. Now, the difference between Yugioh and Maximum Overlord is that Yugioh is way more focused on maximums than Magnum Overlord. Magnum Overlord is basically like, oh yeah, it was a cool machine deck. It just happens to have maximum monsters in it. This one is basically you summon your maximum monster or you die. Alright, let's get into the cards. Here's some normal monster. Connector Dog is just here because it's a vanilla monster with like high attack. You can probably, well, this is true for the Magnum Overlords as well. You can probably substitute some of the cards for the Aqua Engine or the Beast Engine, depending, of course, if Konami decides to restrict the skill to like only having machines or only having Cybers. Next, Femtron. Femtron is one of the cards that is required for this deck, I believe. Well, you can try running it without it, but the strategy of the deck will drastically change. because some of the monsters require you to have Femtron in your graveyard. Other than that, it's just a 1400 attack Cybers. Alright, onto the main point of this deck. Yugioh the Sky Emperor. Same maximum requirements, yada yada yada, summon with L and R. Requirement, maximum mode. Effect, this card cannot be destroyed by your opponent's trap card effects. So, yeah. I forgot to add Widespread Ruin in here. Just like, pretend it's in here somewhere. maybe replace one of these or something. So, same as Magnum Overlord is immune to trap effects, immune to Widespread Ruin. This card is better than Magnum Overlord because it has 500 more attack though, so there is that. Next, Adolescent Hydron. Requirement, you have 3 or more Cybers monsters in your graveyard, send the top card of your deck to the graveyard. Effect, this card gains attack equal to the number of monsters in your graveyard times 100 until the end of this turn. Then, if you have 8 or more Cybers type monsters in your graveyard, you can draw 1 card. This deck, the Cybers Yugioh deck, dumps monsters really, really easily. Even more so than the Magnum Overlord, so I do think this effect is pretty useful. In any case, this card is our plan B in case we aren't able to summon any maximum monsters. We'll still be getting a lot of attack, since we'll probably be having a lot of monsters into the graveyard. So, I mean, at any case, it has a base 2500 attack anyways, so you can't go really wrong with this one. Next, Seed Crowtrod Brusilium. Yes. Requirement. During the turn you've normal summoned this card, send the top card of the deck to the graveyard. Then, if you send a Cybers type monster to the graveyard by this effect, you can add Cybers type monsters with 0 defense from your graveyard to your hand, up to the number of face-up monsters on your opponent's field. This card is going to be really useful. Same as Magnum Overlord, all of our maximum monsters have 0 attack, and since this card lets you add cards up to the numbers of monsters that your opponent controls, well, you'll probably be getting maybe 2 to 3 cards. I say that because face-down monsters don't count. Still, this is pretty useful, since you'll be dumping a lot of your monsters in the graveyard anyways. And it has high-ish attack. Not the highest attack, but high-ish. It is a level 7 though, which is pretty clunky, so you're gonna have to be... So that's why there's only 2 of these in the deck instead of 3. Next, Crystal Brain. Neil has never used this card, so I'm not sure if this is going to be part of the pack. However, it's in here because I think it's pretty useful. During the turn you've normal summoned this card. Each player sends cards equal to the number of face-up Cybers monsters on your field from the top of the deck to the graveyard. Now, if your opponent's also playing a maximum deck, then this might help them as well, so you will have to watch out for this. But this is a pretty good mill card to get your cards in the graveyard. Next, Yugioh the Sky Emperor L. Requirement maximum mode. Send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. You'll notice that Yugioh, the cost is really big. Send a bunch of cards. Yeah, there's a really real chance of decking yourself out using real Yugioh, so you will have to watch out for that. You can't just spam its effects all the time, otherwise your opponent can just set everything face down and just stall you out. Now, its effect, destroy 1 face-up level 8 or lower monster on your opponent's field. So, anything that's not a maximum monster, you can destroy using this effect. This is something opposed to, like, for example, Ace Breaker, which you can destroy any monster. Ace Breaker can pretty easily destroy maximum monsters, since maximum monsters usually can only attack once per turn, and so you can just set 3, your opponent destroys 1, and then you'll have enough materials as well as drawing a bunch of cards for your next turn, then you can just summon Ace Breaker and destroy their maximum monster. Which is why I think Ace Breaker is going to be pretty good once the next pack comes out. Anyways, back to the Cybers. Zeptron. Requirement. You have no other monsters on your field and have Femtron and Atron in your graveyard. Effect. Send this card from your field to the graveyard and draw 2 cards. Then place 2 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck in any order. This is a straight up deck cycler. You can just get to your maximums pretty easy from here. Just draw cards, put the ones that you don't need at the bottom of your deck. It is tricky. Like, if you don't have any cards in your hand and use this effect, you'll basically just be doing nothing. Yogtron. Requirement: place 1 Femtron, 1 Atron, and 1 Zeptron from your graveyard on the bottom of your deck in any order. Effect: send this card from your field to the graveyard and draw 3 cards. Then, send 3 cards from your hand to the graveyard. This is more deck cycling. If you are going to be cutting something, you'll probably be cutting this one, or at least some copies of this one, since it requires you to have Femtron, Atron, and Zeptron in your graveyard, and that's not always going to happen. Like, for example, if you open this card, it basically does nothing. Heavenly Gift. It's same as Magnum Overlord. It's here, it draws stuff. Same with Heavenly Invitation, it gets you stuff from the graveyard, yada yada yada, blah blah blah, mill. Next, Monster Reincarnation. Unfortunately, since Yggdrago is a light attribute, we won't have access to Reoccurring Nightmare. So, next best thing is Monster Reincarnation. But I mean, like, most of us, if we've been playing Rush Duel series, if you're watching this Rush Duel video, you probably already have Monster Reincarnation, so I don't think you have to worry about that. Next, Viscous Dude of Providence. Requirement: shuffle 4 monsters with 100 or less defense from your graveyard into the deck. Effect: draw 1 card. So this doesn't necessarily get you to your mat. Well, it can, since it draws you a card. But this is mainly for recycling cards from your graveyard. Like, if you happen to have a maximum monster and then you're about to deck out, you can activate this, shuffle a bunch into your deck, and then you can maybe live for 1 turn. Honestly, I don't think it's as useful as the Heavenly cards. If you want to get rid of this, you probably can. Now, some other cards that I want to talk about. Shrinker Shrimp. Requirement: send 2 face-up Cybers type monsters from your field to the graveyard. Effect: 1 face-up monster on your opponent's field loses attack equal to the number of monsters sent to the graveyard to meet the requirement, times 300 until the end of this turn. Honestly, I don't think this is that useful. Most of the stuff we want to do is we want to just dump everything from our hand and just draw more cards. This is level 5. It can be a little clunky. Having high-level monsters, even level 5 monsters in maximum decks, are going to be really clunky anyways. So personally, I don't think this is that useful. I think this is a bait. You could try experimenting with this, but I don't think it's going to be that useful. Now, Skyporter Max. Skyporter Max actually has you probably have more of an argument of playing this in a Yggdrago deck, because Yggdrago cards, they like to send themselves from the deck to the graveyard, so you probably will have the ability to shuffle 10 monsters from your graveyard into the deck, as well as extra maximum monsters in your graveyard. If you notice, we're not playing as many spell traps as Machine Magnum Overlord, so we should have enough room. I mean, if you open this turn 1, it still does nothing, but I mean, it's there. Also, it's not a Cybers, so if the skill requires you to have only Cybers in your deck, then we can't play this. Right, so next, Particle Acceleration. This is the Cybers MST card. I'm pretty sure this card is a bait. I don't think it's useful at all. And since our Yggdrago's already immune to traps, and like if your opponent plays like a Curtain of Sparks or something, then like, oh no, your opponent now has 3,000 attack. It's a shame this is 4,000 though, so I don't think that's going to be that useful here, even if it's released. So if there's something like maybe Emergency Evacuation Device or Magic Cylinder, then there would be an argument of playing this. But as of right now, since you're already immune to Widespread Ruin and your battle traps affecting attack probably won't do anything, this card is completely not needed. I already talked about Shield and Sword, same thing applies to this. Not as useful since, well, arguably you can try playing Shield and Sword here, because if you use a maximum monster, maximum monsters are not affected by it. So if you use it while using a maximum monster, then your monster will still have 4,000 attack. However, you will have to be giving up Monster Reincarnation, and I think more consistency in this case is just better than just a win more card. Next, Quantum Hole. When a Cyberus-type monster on your field is destroyed by battle by an opponent's attack, effect, draw 2 cards, then place 2 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck in any order. This is seemingly good on paper. You could just cycle your deck, your cards, put the ones that you don't need back in your deck. However, you probably won't have any cards left over in your hand anyways. And if you do, they'll be your maximum monsters, and you don't really want to be getting rid of those, but realistically, you probably won't be having any cards in your hand, and then so basically, you'll just be drawing cards and then putting them back to your bottom of your deck. And on top of this being a trap card, yeah, this card, I don't think it's good. And those are basically the decks that I'm pretty sure we're getting in the next pack. Now, overall, I still don't think the early maximums are that good. Again, this will live or die depending on the skills that they give us. But at least this is kind of a jumping off point of where I think maximums will go. Maximums should get better in the future. But as of right now, they're well, they're fun, I guess. Well, let's say no to more cards, but they're okay. They're okay. But that's gonna be it from me today. So, if you've been watching for this long, I thank you for watching. I've been Kenyaki. You've been beautiful, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!